2 years ago, on the 24th of February 2022, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. And in the words of the UN head of political affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, when she addressed the Security Council earlier in February this year, we are no closer to the end of this illegal and unjustified war. Joining me from her office in Kyiv is Denise Brown, resident and humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine. That means that she's the senior UN official in the country. Hi, Denise.
Okay.
Now, Denise, we're speaking in early February and not long after yet another wave of attacks on Ukrainian cities and towns. Now, we understand that Russian-fired missiles hit 6 regions and at least 5 people were known to have been killed. And the attack also damaged critical civilian infrastructure, particularly in Mykolaiv and Kyiv. Give me an idea of what kind of effect this will have on the civilian population.
I think it's important to emphasize that these attacks take place almost every single day in certain parts of the country. And I think it's safe to say that, there's an immediate reaction, and I count myself as one of the people who immediately react because we are living here with the Ukrainians during this war, and there's an immediate reaction of fear. The fear of hearing the air siren go off, not knowing what's coming at you, hearing the explosions, and is it the Patriot system shooting down the missiles or the drones, or are those missile and drones getting through? So there's always some moments of uncertainty of exactly what's happening. So I think for all of us here, there's an immediate fear reaction, which I think is completely normal in this context. And then there's the response, the immediate response of the first responders from the government side, and the humanitarian response, which is coming together more and more often, deploying psychosocial support. That becomes a huge need in the country. And also the immediate supplies that are required to repair immediately windows and doors and roofs that are damaged in the waves caused by the explosions. Often food or cash are also immediately provided. But what also comes with those attacks, particularly for the population, is loss. Loss of life, loss of your home, loss of your sense of security. Loss is a big sentiment here. And often when schools or health clinics are hit, clinics or hospitals or the healthcare providers, then there's also loss of access to services, loss of access to a doctor, to a nurse, to a clinic, to a school. So it's all of these things at the same time. And then when the energy infrastructure is hit, then there's loss of water, electricity, and heating. So it's cumulative effect of fear plus loss. And then the government, of course, that began with the regional and local authorities to provide an immediate support with the humanitarian community. So, it's with great sort of sorrow that I say we've become pretty good at this. And we've become pretty good at this because we have to do it almost every single day.
And how does the UN coordinate with the authorities when they're responding to these kind of attacks? How does that work?
So in the regions in particular, because that's really where we, I think, have an added value, there's an immediate coordination through OCHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and we have people all deployed in the regions along the Oblast. We work alongside these authorities, regional authorities, local authorities. They know who to call. They know who to call so that we can mobilize the partners. We have a network of over 500 partners, and the local partners, the national partners, they're really the ones who are based in these communities. We have several offices across OCHA and the UN agencies in these different oblasts. But those local actors are the closest to where these things happen, and they deploy immediately, and we support them. So it's a good network. It's a good chain. The coordination works well. Again, we have to respond so often to these incidents that it's now part of we know we have to do it, so we're prepared for it.
And what would happen if the UN wasn't in Ukraine?
There would be gaps. The country has over 4 million people that are displaced, 6 million people who left. soldiers who are mobilized, infrastructure, health clinics, schools damaged, people stressed. We fill a gap, but we fill it in coordination with the authorities. So we don't cover 100% of the need. That's absolutely clear. But I believe that particularly in the Oblast along the front line, the humanitarian community plays an instrumental role, bringing capacity, bringing resources, bringing experience, bringing our support to fill those important gaps.
The last time we spoke, about a year ago, you told me that at the time you were making a big effort to get out of the capital, out of Kyiv, visiting different parts of the country. I'm wondering, is that still possible? Has it got easier? Has it got more difficult? And how have things changed? And what I mean by that is, what are people telling you when you speak to them? Has the mood changed over the last year?
It's very difficult in the country right now with the intensification of the attacks. And we have, just on the UN side, more than 3,000 staff, many deployed in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, in Mykolaiv, in Odessa, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, where there are daily hits. So while it's more difficult than when I spoke to you a year ago, it's also even more important that myself and senior colleagues in the UN, that we go out as much as possible. I can't expect UN staff, national or international, to sit in Kharkiv and live through daily missile strikes in the city and not go there and be with them. So that's what I'm doing, but it also gives me the opportunity to talk to the regional authorities, talk to the local authorities, go on the frontline convoys. So I see and I understand, and also the authorities know and understand that the most senior person from the UN in Ukraine is prepared to be with them. I think it's an incredibly important signal from our side that no matter how difficult it gets, we will make every effort to be with them. And that has become, I think, one of the most powerful messages of this response. It's not just about our delivering supplies, we're providing support. Our presence is important. The presence of the NGOs is important. Knowing that people know that you were there in a very difficult circumstance, but still you come, I think is something that is very important for at least the people, the Ukrainians that I meet in these communities and the local authorities.
As I say, we spoke before, we did this last time, it was marking a year of the war. Now it's 2 years. Do you think that it would go on this long? Last time we spoke?
The war should never have started. And it's hard for me to say that I'm surprised it's gone on this long, because this is not the answer. War is never the answer. And the Ukrainians are living through such violence and loss and grief. All I can say is it needs to be over. There needs to be peace here. These people need to get back to their lives. The economy is in shatters. Civilian infrastructure seems to be targeted regularly. Loss of life. Families broken up. Increases in gender-based violence. All of these things have an impact on the people of Ukraine. So the country needs peace, and we all need the war to be over.
But the reality is there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. The UN is saying that. We heard that from Rosemary DiCarlo when she spoke to the Security Council, and people talk about stalemates. So in terms of your future planning, of course, we would all like the war to be over. Is that your assessment when you're planning for your staff, for budgeting, for donations? Are you looking at a similar situation going into the next months, even us having this conversation in a year's time?
The damage is overwhelming. The needs are enormous. The war is not over. These people are in huge need. And even if the war were over tomorrow, the needs would remain enormous in this country. It will take years and years to rebuild this country, and years for the country to deal with the trauma. So my projection is whatever happens with this horrendous and illegal war, the people of Ukraine will continue to need support both on the humanitarian side and on the recovery side for the foreseeable future.